My name is Chris Harding. Done a lot of things in my life. Think have all been shaping me to try and change the world for good in some way. I ran a business for 15 years, trying to help business owners to think bigger, become more, aim higher, which however you want to define it. And that was challenging. And I guess truthfully, I hoped it was going to get easier and easier, and it didn't. And that left me with lots of questions about why is that, and what am I missing, and why am I doing this, and really questions about what am I here for, if I'm really honest about it. And I needed somewhere to go to actually process those questions and find language for those answers, and to get some clarity to, what is this next chapter of my life about? I'm a very curious guy about all sorts of things in life. I can get interested in anything. And I've read a lot of books. I've been, curious about why do human beings do the things they do? How do we become our best self? What are the things that make the biggest difference? And for quite some time, I had been convinced of this idea that the world squeezes us into a mold that says, if you do this to get this, then you will be this. As if my identity is defined out there somewhere. Like my true identity is defined by what I achieve. Although the phrase working from the inside out might have been something I had said myself before, it wasn't until Arjan challenged some of my thinking, which was probably in the wrong order, that I really began to think about who I am and who am I becoming. Not as a result of what I've done, but that what I do comes out of who I am. And therefore, a big part of what we do every week is to try and articulate who I am, who I'm becoming, and even just finding the language to articulate who I am is a big part of being able to put a stake in the ground and say, right, yeah, this is who I am becoming. This is who I'm growing into. This is, hopefully the difference I'm going to make in the world. And if you don't have language for it, it's very, very hard. And it's not an instant process. You can't just take an assessment. There's lots of good assessments, and I've done lots of good assessments. DISC, Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder. I've done them all. Great language. And a lot of it was very ego-stroking and very satisfying, and feeling like, oh, great, now I've got some language for it. But none of it got deep enough to try and help me know who I am, and therefore how I'm going to show up in the world. And that's what I really want to know. And that's why I turn up every week. For about an hour, when we're, sharing I am statements, it's some of the best bit about it is when other people are sharing their I am statement, often it's actually very inspiring to see other people stepping up into a much bigger picture of who they are. It makes it possible for you to think, oh, I could be a bit bolder, think a bit bigger. And I write lots of notes. And I think and I do think about these things outside of that room. But the most useful thing is having that hour in the week that focuses your mind to take some time to work on who am I? Because because it won't happen any other way. If you don't actually make the time, nothing happens, nothing changes. So sometimes it feels like you're making giant leaps. Sometimes it feels like you're just fine-tuning something. But over time, when you look back, you can realize that something is shifting. Something powerful is emerging. And that is very satisfying. If anybody was wondering, why would I give an hour a week to this group, to this process? I would say the reason is because you might think you're looking for an answer to a question, but you're not. If you really want your life to be all that it can be, you're not looking for an answer to a question. You're looking for the question. And the questions are not obvious. The questions reveal themselves in the space between the people in the room. Because somebody will say something and it will make you think in a different way that you can't just download from a book or a podcast or an article. It kind of reveals itself. This is not a program with 7 steps where if you sign up, I promise you in a year's time, your life will be radically different. What's more likely to happen is you'll see yourself very differently. You'll see the world very differently. You may even see life very differently because your questions will be different. So if you're just looking for answers on how to master what you already know, this is not for you. But if you want to explore whether there's questions you didn't even know you needed to ask, this is for you. You have to come at it with a curious, open mind, holding lightly to what you think you know, in order to discover what you didn't know you needed to know. I was introduced to Arjan by a mutual friend. Possibly 7 years ago, maybe even longer. I'm not sure. And sometimes you meet people and you sense that there's something significant about that connection, but you don't know what it is. And I think Arjan and I are quite deep and spiritual, for want of a better word. And I think, I certainly sense that there was something that Arjan carries that was going to be significant for me to discover what it is that he carries that is going to sharpen me. And actually, I think that is one of the things that is really precious about this group, that the people are there because they carry something significant. And it takes all of us. The real goal is in the middle of all of us, if that makes any sense. But yeah, Ian just has ways of thinking that sharpen me. I don't know if you ever come across that phrase, iron sharpens iron. He calls himself a futurist. But it's not in a trend tracking kind of way. It's not in a this is what I predict kind of way. It's in a way of examining reality and seeing a different future, a different possibility, a different way of being. And we all need people like that in our life, who are going to call out the best in us, who are going to see in us what we don't necessarily see. I'll give you an example. I once told Arjan that I was a dot connector. And he said, "No, you're not a dot connector. You're the guy who understands what's going on in the spaces between the dots, which is much more valuable." And I hadn't seen that in myself. Yeah, and that really helps. He sharpens me, and I'm very grateful for that.